Hey guys, Tango and I hope you're having a fun, safe Labor Day. I did some research on the history of Labor Day and I found some pretty interesting things. Labor Day was created in the 1880s and finalized in 1894 to celebrate American workers, their accomplishments, and the right to collectively bargain with their employer with a union. Despite declining membership, unions are actually a major part of American history since they literally built the middle class and stopped worker exploitation, especially in mines and factories. Unions helped create safety standards in the workplace, child labor laws, and the standard 40-hour work week and weekends. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, conditions in the mines and factories were very harsh and very dangerous. Many people often died on the job, and unions helped create a safer environment for everyone. Back in the 1800s and even early 1900s, unions were so controversial, people literally died. They died for the right to bargain with their employer with a union. There were several instances, obviously, there were hundreds of protests, demonstrations, and even riots to allow workers to unionize, to negotiate safer conditions, better wages, etc. There was a lot of anti-union violence and a lot of suppression of this because companies wanted to keep their profits as high as possible and disregard employees in the process. One instance, in 1886 in Chicago, a bomb went off and it killed nearly a dozen people. This was known as the Haymarket bombing or Haymarket massacre. In the early 1900s in Ludlow, Colorado, mine workers were protesting with their families for better wages, and well over a dozen people were killed, including mine workers and even their wives and children, which is absolutely horrible. Coincidentally, John D. Rockefeller was the owner of that mine. But anyway, back to present day. Many people have claimed that unions are irrelevant or just unnecessary today, but that's absolutely not true. In September of 2015, income inequality is still very severe and it's still a huge problem. And no, it's not just hippies talking about it. Many big business leaders have spoken out against income inequality, like Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, legendary trader Paul Tudor Jones, and billionaire investor Nick Hanauer. They've all said that income inequality, it's not only is it not fair, it's not sustainable, and eventually workers are going to revolt. Paul Tudor Jones said that extreme income inequality is solved either through higher taxes, political revolution, or even war. Nick Hanauer actually compared modern day America to pre-revolution France. America is definitely not beyond unions. Here are a few quick fast facts about income inequality. I will make a more detailed video on this later. Number one, since 1980, worker productivity has risen 63%, but wages have only gone up 8% since then. Number two, from 1978 to 2015, average worker wages have risen 10.9%, while CEO wages have risen 997%. Not only is this completely outrageous, it's totally unwarranted because companies that pay their CEOs more actually end up performing less for stockholders and Wall Street in the long haul. Number four, if the minimum wage had kept pace with the cost of living and worker productivity, it would be closer to $21 an hour actually. Many people, including Bernie Sanders and the other Democrats, have been campaigning for $15 an hour as a livable wage. In most cities, you're able to support yourself, have an apartment, and buy groceries, and not have to depend on food stamps, which I will get to in one of my next points. Number six, purchasing power with the minimum wage peaked in 1973 at $4 an hour when the purchasing price was about $22.40 an hour. Well, in today's money. As I said earlier, many minimum wage workers literally can't afford to feed themselves. Big employers that pay minimum wage despite making millions and even billions of dollars a year, like McDonald's and Walmart, they still pay minimum wage, and as a result, literally millions of workers with jobs. So no, please stop saying that they're lazy. Just because they're working at a minimum wage job does not make them lazy. They have a job and they're working. They should be able to support themselves. But like I said, many of these companies, they literally depend on the government to subsidize them, not just with their massive tax breaks and possible tax loopholes. Their workers literally need food stamps to survive because they're not paying them enough. McDonald's literally sent out a memo to its workers suggesting that they get a second job and teaching them how to apply for federal assistance because they are that greedy. The specific fact for number 8 is that every Walmart store on average takes in an average of $900,000 to $1 million a year in food stamps to pay or to compensate for their lack of wages. So literally every Walmart that you shop in is basically absorbing $900,000 a year from the taxpayers just to subsidize their near slavery wages. Yeah, that's a nice thing to know. It's a thought to remind you not to shop at Walmart and to support ethical companies that pay livable wages like Costco. They start their employees off at about $13 an hour and they allow them to unionize. They also give them health benefits. So I highly recommend switching from Walmart to Costco for your cheap good needs. Also, one of the reasons that people think unions are irrelevant and outdated is due to their decline in the last several decades. And there are many reasons behind this. But in the 1950s, about 30% of American workers were part of a union. In 1985, that number dropped to about 17%. And now today, only about 7% of workers are with a union. Mainly because many big corporations have actively tried to crush and suppress union activity by using temp and staffing agencies to treat their workers as independent contractors or freelancers, which basically allows them to pay workers less, give them less benefits, and assume less risk and liability on the job. It ultimately screws over workers because for paid sick leave if they're injured on the job. Treatment like this is unethical and a huge slap in the face to workers. Which is why California courts ruled that Uber can no longer classify their drivers as freelancers, which is a huge step in the right direction.